So, how did you like Dave McKeegan's responses? This is what Jarrett was going over. You see, first of all, Dave said, I'm going off of what Phil Pressel, Hexagon engineer, said it was pressurized with nitrogen because it was the film in space in a vacuum for an extended period, the emulsion would evaporate. An extended period is not instantaneously. This is what Jarrett said. Your argument about mission duration is flawed. Ask anybody who has ever climbed Everest and what happens to you when you expose water to the low pressure up there. Or better still, put some water in a vacuum chamber and see what happens when you evacuate said chamber. It boils before your eyes, despite being at room temperature or lower. No need to wait for months on end. Even if we assume the film is only 1% by weight water, that means for every kilogram of film, you have 10 grams of water that will outgas. Dave responds, as I pointed out, the hexagons were in space for almost 9 months, where the gambits were in space for 30 days without being pressurized. NASA used Nikon F3 film cameras on EVAs outside the shuttle and the Mir station, again without being pressurized, and yet the film did not outgas. Then I said to Dave here, one other thing, Dave, you could see our images that came out of the vacuum chamber were crystal clear, except for the hues were not correct. The images from the university vacuum chamber were a tad more skewed, but with the use of an optical printer or today's software, that can easily be corrected, as you will see on the live stream on Saturday, August 23rd at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You really need to ask Destin from Smarter Every Day to see if he can get hold of the original satellite images. I think that he can, or at least the dupes. Without those, anyone could have easily corrected the images. That's my answer to how Bruce McCandless was able to take those clear images. It's not rocket science.
Well done. That's good. Yeah, I've seen most of those exchanges.
I also contacted David Percy and told him that they were all calling us liars, especially Dave and MC Toon. Let's just put the emphasis on MC Toon, calling you a liar on that live. And so I said to David, I said, I'll tell you what, since it wasn't really fair because I didn't have the images of the opposite sides of those film strips, I am going to pull the exact same film out that I showed, and this time I'm going to show the back sides of both of them. So that means I'm going to show all four film strips to show what happened. And you could clearly see on that image that the film that was in the vacuum chamber has lost its luster, just like we said in the original article. Only this time we have both sides there to show it. So there's no way that those guys can call us liars anymore. It's a totally fair experiment. Then
Yeah.
one guy says, oh, well, you're lying again because you said that that was taken at the university. So you're lying again. You're liars. Where does it say that in the article? Where? I said, we did it. We were the ones that subjected that to our vacuum chamber. And it says, and that's what it says in the article. I didn't say anything about that being at the University of Patras. The ones that were there were the Kodak Ektachrome film that supposedly NASA used on the lunar surface. That's the
Yeah.
film that went to the university. So, guess what Jared did? He contacted Kodak. And this is what Jared wrote to Kodak. He said, to whom it may concern, I'd like to order some 70mm Kodak Ektachrome SO special order 386 medium speed ASA 64 color reversal film as used on the Apollo moon missions, and some 70mm Kodak SO special order 243 high definition aerial film as used on the unmanned lunar orbiter missions. Thank you, Jera White. So now we'll wait and see. And last but not least, I still believe that he could contact Destin from Smarter Every Day because he's right in there with NASA. He gives the presentations to NASA. And even Destin was very speculative about that Artemis having 15 refuelings and 20 refuelings. And then Phil Mason from Thunderfoot said that it's going to require 30 refuelings. So he's right in there with them. His father works for NASA. So why can't he just ask him? And then the last thing I said to him, I said, look, Dave, if we went and took this to a court of law, I says, I'll tell you what we can bring with us. We can have the physical evidence in our hand. We can have the original negatives that we put in the vacuum chamber, in our vacuum chamber, Not only that, but we can also have the original negatives that were placed in the University of Patras vacuum chamber, and we'll do one better. We'll even have the faculty member there that conducted the experiments there in court. So I says, this is what we have. We have exhibit A, B, and C. What do you have? Images from the internet. So guess who's going to win this argument in court?
It's great. It was a good exchange. I followed that when it came up. I thought, we're going to get some truth here. And ironically, we have, because a lot of the lying that we supposedly do has been disproved. We're not lying. At the worst, we may make mistakes, but at best, we're taking the honest approach. What you've done with the vacuum chamber test was based on the fact that film needed to be kept under pressure when in space, in a vacuum. That was all.
Yeah, and here's the thing about that. And that's why I said this to Dave. I says, well, if you go back to the Owless article, you'll notice that those pictures that came out of our vacuum chamber are crystal clear as well. So I says, all you have to do is basically take the hues, the tint, and just slide it down, and it's all corrected. This is what came right off the negatives. And I even told him in another comment that I'll send the negatives to you. I'll clip a few of those off of there and send them to you. I don't have a problem with that. Give me your post office box number or something, then I'll send them to you. I says, again, we have the evidence here in our hands. Anybody could take the ones McCandless had and color correct them and take the fog out. That's easy. So we need the original negatives, or else you have no case. None of you do. And you could tell that to your friends too. They don't have a case. You need those negatives because you're the ones that are calling us liars. Therefore, it's your responsibility to get those negatives. So do you see what he said? He says, well, that's like asking the military for a stealth bomber. And I said, well, no, it's not, because a stealth bomber is a big difference than from film from a satellite. I said, it's all declassified now, so you shouldn't have any trouble getting it. And then I said, back to Destin again. I says, I bet you any money he could get at least 1 or 2 frames.
Well, they got a whole freezer full of the stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like all the magazine, all the DAC film, everything. Don't they have that in a freezer somewhere?
And then speaking of radiation, what about this article here about what happens to digital electronics and screens on the ISS? That's only up there at torr 10 to the -7 to 9 with radiation. Yeah, and look at all the shielding that they have to put in there, or else they don't work there on the ISS. So how are those digital cameras working out there without all of that radiation protection? Well, the thing is, that's what they have to do to make them work.
Yep.
So what do you think that's going to do to photographic film without protection?
I think we know the answer to that one.
Yeah, we do. Because I put one roll of film outside the microwave oven and blasted it for 1 second, and look what happened to the film. Destroyed it. As a matter of fact, aren't the images on that film pretty close to what you see on these screens?
I mean, that description that I think it was Jarrah gave the description on the satellite photographs taken of that Russian runway up in the far northeast of Russia. And he was saying, these things are so badly damaged. They're not showing what you would see today on, say, Google Earth or Google Maps, which you can probably find the same runway if you look hard enough. It's as if the negative or whatever was producing that particular image was damaged. Whether it was radiation or vacuum is irrelevant, but it's not being protected.
No, but then Dave comes back with all of those images that are crystal clear. So Dave was extremely pedantic about doing that. He went and he made sure that that had either Gambit on there or Corona on there or the KH4 on there or KH9 on there. He made sure that those images had that on there, that they were crystal clear. Again, I told him, I reminded him that so are ours, except the hues are completely skewed.
And most of the ones were black and white, which is a different story.
But you have to realize those are spy satellites. So the accuracy of the information, how high they're actually flying at. They're claiming that they're out farther and that's, say, okay, you can't shoot us down. They could be doing that just above the Kármán line. If they're going to take photographs of the ground, you want to be as low as possible when you're in orbit. Even at 50 miles, you can fly for 3 or 4 days before you need to fire it up. You can maintain an orbit at 50 miles for 3 days. And that would be perfect for taking the pictures. They claim, 100, 150, 200 miles out there. That's so, hey, you can't shoot us down.
Dave is going on about the same story. Oh, it's about altitude. And he says, well, you're wrong. You see what he said to Jarrah about that? Well, you're wrong because it wasn't this altitude, it was that altitude. And Jarrah came back and corrected him.
You'll never get an accurate number on those altitudes.
But Dave came back with all the images on there and they were crystal clear. And that's when I said, okay, that's fine. They're crystal clear. But again, the same with Bruce McCandless out there. Bruce was only out there for 90 minutes, according to ChatGPT 5, right? They have a new version out now, which is supposed to be more accurate. McCandless, it said that he had the MMU pack on, that little jetpack unit he had on there so he could maneuver out there. According to ChatGPT 5, he only wore that for 90 minutes out there, and then he returned to the shuttle. So that means that that camera was out there exposed to torr 10 to the minus 6 for 90 minutes. So when we look at it from that angle, again, we need to see the negatives. We need to see the original negatives to see if they color corrected that tint. Because on ours and on the one at the university, both the tints went off. They were all skewed. Let's face it, they still took a nice picture. We still took pictures, and they were nice and clear, except the hues were skewed. And the ones that were in Bill's chamber at the university, they fogged more.
He's got a little bit more power on the vacuum, but not even those testings are even close to being at the ISS. Now, if you look at page 11 on that PDF file, you can see how they had to set this experiment up. They had to take the motherboard, and they got this impregnated boron and about 4 inches of lead to protect. This is on the ISS. They have to protect this thing from it doing it. This isn't film. This is circuitry. And then you come down and you look at, they left the video card open and had to protect it. And when you get down to page 14, as they're booting it up, this is what happened to the screens. This is a laptop on the ISS, and the motherboard is protected. The graphics card isn't, and they're being affected like that. So how can you even put a digital camera on the ISS without some real serious modifications to it to protect it?
It's quite obviously damaged insofar as it's not showing the correct colors.
Some of them, the computer didn't even boot up. It just froze. If you look at page 11, they show you the chamber room with the shielding in it, how it's being done. But can you imagine just film? What would happen to it? It's so much more delicate than computers. Right?
Impregnated boron and lead.
Yeah, to protect it.
That's protecting against radiation, not against vacuum.
No, because it's on the ISS. It's got.
Yeah.
So every computer aboard the ISS have to be this well protected all the time.
Well, it's also, they have to switch the computers off when the ISS flies through the South Atlantic anomaly. Radiation is quite severe at that point. There's obviously a problem with radiation.
Yeah, but can you imagine a film camera, the actual film?
Exactly.
Like, the entire emulsion is designed to react to radiation, which is light, right? It's actively doing that. You can't harden it. You can't synthesize it. That emulsion cannot be synthesized, and that's just one of the most incredible things out there, that we can't do something like that.
Well, we can change it to a digital camera, which records pictures quite differently from film camera.
And look at what's happening there with that card.
Yeah.
Look what's going to happen to the electronics on a digital camera.
Yeah, the radiation affects it, the same as vacuum affects photographic film. And just to repeat, it's not the backing that's affected, it's the emulsion that's affected. Film has light-sensitive emulsion coated onto a plastic backing, a polyester or S-star backing, which is strong enough to maintain its integrity in a vacuum. The light-sensitive emulsion is affected. That's what we've demonstrated. That's what we've been discussing. And obviously NASA discovered this probably reasonably early on when they were flying their camera-equipped satellites. They weren't completely destroyed. They were just damaged, and they wanted to remove the damage, hence the pressurization in the Hexagon. That removed that problem with vacuum affecting photographic film. There's no dispute about that.
Well, they did enough testing on the cameras to know that they couldn't use lubrication.
Oh, those pictures that Bruce McCandless took, are the pictures that he took available?
Yeah, I have them here.
And they presumably black and white and color, or just color?
No, they were all color.
They're all color.
Yeah.
As you said, color can be corrected. Yeah, of course
Black and
it can.
white just as easily. Let's put it this way. I can take the negatives that we subjected to the vacuum chamber, the black and white ones, and I can clean those negatives up and get a pretty darn good photo out of it.
That's not a problem.
The whole point here is the original negatives. You see,
Yeah. So they can make suppositions, suggestions, same as we can.
but we're
Well,
not calling them liars. We're not saying, well, you're liars because you can't get a hold of the negatives, are you? But they're calling us liars. See, that's hypocritical.
yeah, it shows a desperation as well. Why do you need to call somebody a liar? Why don't you just say, oh, you've made a mistake. Here's what you said. Here's the correction. That's not called lying. When you lie, you deliberately mislead somebody. We're not trying to deliberately mislead anybody. We're just putting forward information which we have acquired, drawing conclusions from it. That's a standard scientific process. If one is wrong, then it can be corrected. We're not lying.
In Dave's film, in the first one, in the first video that Dave made, he put MC Toon up there, and MC Toon pulled that first article up on all this, and he said that, Marcus, you're a liar. You're lying. You're lying.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Explain it. And of course he says, well, you didn't explain it. All you did was go on to another topic. And I had already put a video out before that saying that the reason why we took that article down was because we didn't show the other side of it. I rushed it. It's my fault. And I admitted that it was my fault. What does Dave do? He doesn't say, well, they've already said that that was their fault or that it was something because it wasn't fair and that's why they took it down. No, he didn't say that. He said, we're lying. And then I said, the article is back up now, and this time it shows both sides of the film. And the point still stands. The one in the vacuum has lost its luster on that side, on the front side of it. And you can't say it doesn't because the lighting is perfect on all four strips. I made damn sure of that. I sent one image to Dave Percy and he said, no, we can't use that because the lighting's not even enough. So I said, okay, I'll wait till the sun comes up and then I'll open the blinds up. Then I'll take a picture of the four strips there. Then it was perfect. It was even lighting all the way across there. And when you look at the vacuum compared to the control, you'll notice that the back sides of it are closer to being the same, but it's the front side of it. That's what's lost its luster, and that's what we said on the very first article. Well, how about now, guys? Are we lying now? Now that you see the whole thing there?
It's a very emotive term to call somebody a liar.
Somebody calling you a liar is not the same as saying, hey, you made a mistake, or why don't you just put the other side of it up? All you have to do is just upload the opposite sides of the other strips and then we can compare them. No, but you're liars.
It's the use of an emotive term which is demonstrating a lack of concern, a lack of care in what you're doing. To call somebody a liar is such an emotive term. You don't need to do it. We don't call people liars. We say, maybe you've made a mistake. Why don't you try this? That's basically what peer review is about.
You see, and then Dave goes on and he says, yes, but Marcus said that all film is destroyed in a vacuum. Well, it is, so far, as we've seen. But here's the thing, it's so easy to take an optical printer back in those days and fix the problem. And all you need to do is use those corrective filter wheels. And you could color correct anything on an optical printer. It only takes maybe 15 minutes longer back then as it does today to just do it on the software.
That's right. There you go. That's
So
not
we
lying.
we can produce the negatives to anyone that wants them. I have no problem. I'll clip a few off so you can compare them yourself. But do you think those guys will do that? No, we can't get them. That's what they say. Oh, we can't get a hold of them. That's like trying to ask NASA or the military for a stealth bomber. That's what we get. Okay, fine. You might not be able to get them, but I bet you could get the dupes.
The dupes would, not the originals.
You see, and that's the problem is the dupes can be corrected.
Of course they can. It's a very sad method of discussion to revert to abusive terms when it's totally unnecessary, except for your supporters who agree with you.
And the other thing Dave failed to mention was that those images that we took are crystal clear as well. Why didn't you mention that, Dave? And you should have mentioned too that in both instances, they can be color corrected. We could color correct ours, they can color correct theirs. Except there's a big difference here. We have the negatives to prove it. You guys don't. So if we sent you those negatives, you're going to see it yourself. We're willing to do that. We are willing to give you the negatives that came out of that chamber.
But why? He's never even handled a piece of film before. Have you ever seen him with a piece of film in his hand when he's
Never.
doing all this stuff?
No, but now what Dave can do is he can answer why they have to have so much insulation and lead and everything else around the digital stuff. Imagine what that's going to do to the film without protection.
Right. But Dave puts a whole lot of stuff into the flat earthers. I mean, he goes on holidays with them. He goes to, the Antarctic. He sits there. I mean, they all get cozy, and they sit down and wait for the sunset, that romantic sunset. He's with his flat earther buddies, He spends zero time with this. He can't even pull out a piece of film and look at it. He doesn't have a film camera.
We might have one, but we haven't seen it.
If he had one, he would produce it. Okay, he takes a pot shot at it, and then he goes back to his flat earth buddies and just cozies up with them.
Oh, that's a good thing you said that, because here's another thing I said to Dave. I said, look, you guys are calling us liars between you and MC Toon, and I made sure that I put that, Apollo Detectives lying with a question mark on it. So you're calling us liars. That's fine. You're calling us liars. Well, here's the thing. You're on those podcasts with those flat earthers. You went there to Antarctica with those flat earthers, the same flat earthers who you were calling liars. MC Toon was calling liars, and the rest of your crew was calling liars. But when we ask you or invite you on, what do? You call us liars, and you don't want to associate with liars. Well, that's hypocritical, Dave.
His channel is not about us. Our channel is dedicated to one topic. Did man land on the moon or not? And of course he didn't. Okay? His channel is just all over the place to get views and be monetized for whatever. And he happens to get his most views doing the flat earth stuff. So he snuggled up to them. Like I said, they took a little holiday together. Maybe it was an anniversary they were having, right?
They went there to prove that the sun does not set in winter, which everybody in their right mind knew anyway.
Yeah, of course they did.
Well, yeah, you didn't have to jump on a plane to do that. He's willing to spend his time on that. He comes and puts a little video on us just taking pot shots at it, and off he goes on a different topic. We're dedicated to this subject. We research this subject. He doesn't. And that's where he loses right off the bat. He can blabber like this. And if you look at his videos, I wish we could have Chase Hughes on to analyze Dave's behavior. He pets his dog, and he does this, and he's doing this with his hands like he's throwing shit out at us and hoping it'll stick somewhere, right? I'm not an expert in body language, but you can see it. It's right there. Listen to what he says and listen to his actions. He's petting his dog and he's doing this. Every time he wants to make a point, which is bullshit, he does this. All the time.
Another thing I'd like to say, too, is that we have not used a script or any written material right from day one. So why did those guys have to use it? If you know your topic, you should not need to pull out a script and then have it typed out and reading it off of a teleprompter.
It's a good point.
We've never done that. Not from day one. We might have a PDF. We'll have it up on the screen. And guess what? I'll show that PDF that we're talking about, and I'll have it scrolling down. One person made a comment about that, and I said, all those guys have to do is pause the video and read the text that's scrolling down the screen. It's the same one we're reading, and I make sure that I put the front page on there so that they can go and look that up themselves. There's no need for me to put all that information into the text box or the description box. It says that's the reason why I always put the first page there with all the numbers on it that you can go and look it up yourself. So one commenter said, wow, that was easy. You know what? I did exactly what you said, and I got the whole PDF. You're right. You did put the whole thing up from start to finish. And I says, yeah, well, that's why it scrolls down a little fast. So just pause it. To pause the video and just read the text. And I even make the text smaller, and I might put it into a little computer screen so that it doesn't blur the text so that you can actually read what it's saying in there. And then I said, do those guys do it? No, they'll blow the text up to the whole size of the screen so that it's all fuzzy and blurry. I said, nobody's going to read that.
Except that stuff that Dave was putting up in his video. Why would he put a document up that's modified from 2017?
Yeah, where's the original? The ones we put up have 1969 on it or 1972 on it. We put the originals up. So why don't you guys put the originals up?
What he put up there was just absolute nonsense. It has nothing to do with the original document. Well, of course, NASA wanted to alter the information.
Yeah, that's why you have to go back to the original document on that subject.
And guess what? Scott has all the original documents that he's had for 20 years or more.
That's what's so valuable, that you can actually go back to the original document, see what was said, which is usually quite different from what was said 20 years later, because maybe somebody at NASA had realized that there was a mistake and they needed to correct it. It's a bit late to correct it when the original landings took place in 1969, 1972.
They're correcting it because we're calling them out.
Yep. The more they get called out and the more they have to correct their original documents, the indication is that they realize that there are problems that haven't been resolved. It's a point I've made several times about the testing done by the contractors to NASA, EG&G being one of them. They're quite a big company, and they were doing testing on behalf of NASA, and they reported the results that they had achieved. Now, if they identified problems with what NASA wanted, they would report it. What we say is, where were the corrections made to the original testing, which found that vacuum was a problem, or likely to be a problem? Where was the effective changes made? This is what's so difficult to get people to understand, that there are things which were identified as problems, and they were corrected. Okay, let's see where the corrections occurred, how they were done, what the testing was then done. This is a scientific method. It's nothing to do with conspiracies. It's nothing to do with lying. It's nothing to do with anything abusive like that. It's to do with science advancing. And science advances one step at a time. If you're NASA, you have to report these things because NASA is answerable to Congress for its funding.
If you recall, I had mentioned once before, because I was so interested in everything to do with, space flight and everything else, years reading through the documents. And here's all these documents and they're pointing out all these problems. And then all of a sudden when you start to wake up and realize that, no, we didn't actually go anywhere, that was all fantasy, and you start looking into it, that's when I looked at these documents differently. Now what I'm reading, here are the problems. And then I started looking for the PDF files where they fixed the problems.
Yeah, that's the key point.
And there were problems that just were not addressed anymore. Like radiation and vacuum being one of them, fuel consumption figures, everything else on there. You're looking at it and you're saying, oh, we're building the titanium fuel tanks, right? And they can only handle 250, maybe 300 PSI because we can't weld them any better. And then I started looking up welding, and it's like, yeah, titanium's really difficult to work with. And it was like 1974 when they started to figure it out. Well, that's after Apollo. But they couldn't build a fuel tank to carry that weight. And then you see, oh, they're putting these titanium tanks. What are they pressurizing? 5,500 pounds? Bullshit. Here's a PDF file that said that they rip apart at 300 pounds max. And they're testing. And now we got oxygen tanks that have 5,500 pounds in them. Well, they're not titanium. They couldn't possibly be. The stuff is too brittle. That's the same with everything else. So I started looking for the documents where they fixed the problem. And then you realize that, oh, there's a problem with the landing legs, there's a problem with this, there's a problem with that. And of course, they keep updating them, and it still doesn't work. Yeah. Like that one that we went back to, that old one I tripped across, only had one honeycomb in it. The first design only had one, then it becomes two, then it becomes three. Then they put nylon bushings in them to cushion it because of the cold welding and all of this other stuff. And they still tip over because the design itself is not correct. If you want to have a correct design for a landing leg, it has to look like something that they had in Star Trek with the Vulcan ship shaped like a grasshopper leg, because that will cushion it and bring it down and make it land properly. These ones that stick out like that, they only built them like that to spring out because that's all they had for a spaceship to put it in. It had to fit in the spaceship. Well, you build the spaceship that you're going to, or the rocket that you're going to take it to the moon with. First, you design the equipment that you need, and then you figure out what size of machine to carry it. No, we had the rocket first, and then say, okay, well, we only got this much space, jam everything in there. Well, that's just backwards.